This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Today is the fourth and final installment of our annual fall series, School Stories. Every Tuesday this month, we are focusing on issues related to Vermont schools. This week, pre-kindergarten. In 2014, Vermont's then-governor, Peter Shumlin, signed a universal pre-K bill into law. Thereafter, 3- and 4-year-olds could get free pre-K for 10 hours a week through their public school system or through a subsidy on tuition to a private or home-based childcare center. We're about a decade into the implementation of this law, and there have been some big wins. But the pre-K world in Vermont is far from some stable, done deal. If you're struggling to pay for pre-K while you work a full-time job, or you live in a place where there aren't any open slots at providers you trust, you know what's up. The state also has this newer mandate to expand pre-K to full day for all 4-year-olds. How's that going to happen? Today, we're going to be talking with leading education officials about their vision for pre-K in Vermont. But before we get to all that big picture talk, let's hear what it's actually like to be inside one of these childcare centers that we're going to be talking about today. I recently stopped by the YMCA's early childhood program in Burlington during drop-off hours. The 3- and 4-year-olds were all out on the playground acting absolutely insane. So I went inside to a 2-year-old classroom, the Fireflies. You'll hear a bunch of kids, a few parents, and the classroom's lead teachers, Caitlin Durkin and Kate Sullivan.
Hi. How are you?
Blanky's right there, baby. Right here.
Do you want to keep your
Right here, on the floor.
Take your layer off.
See? Blanket.
Oopsie, are you okay? I didn't see your hand there. Let's stand up. You want to fill it up? Do you want to dump that into the sensory table? Oh, wow,
Satisfying.
that was a cool sound. Mom has to go and she'll be back at the end of the day. We're going to have so much fun today.
Whoa, Dream, watch out.
Are you eating some snack over here?
Careful, Dreamy.
Do you want the hug? Hi.
No, thank you.
There you go. Should we build a house together?
Nice job, Dream. Bang, bang.
That was just 1 minute in a 2-year-old classroom. 1 minute. Our first guest knows this world very well. Jocelyn York is the executive director of Turtle Island Children's Center in Montpelier. Hey, Jocelyn.
Hi.
So where are you all in your day right now?
Well, so Turtle Island, and I want to say I'm a co-executive director. Phoebe Stone is also my co-director, so I just want to share that.
Thank you.
So we're a pretty large school. We're actually closed this week because we are moving to our new location. But where we would typically be at noon, it's across the board. So our infants would be, depending on their age, some would be kind of in between naps. Our older ones would be finishing lunch, getting ready for their naps. And then our 2-year-olds would be kind of probably in the middle of lunch right now. And our pre-K would be probably just starting their lunch and then getting ready to start prepping for rest time for those who do rest.
Yeah, so busy time and an exciting
Yes.
time for your center this week, moving locations. I know there's been a lot of build-up to this moment.
Yeah, those who are in the local community know all about it. But yeah, we are finally here. We've been working hard to find a new spot since December, so we are officially about to reopen on Monday there, and still a long road to go with all our work that we have to do, but we're really excited for a new start.
So as you mentioned, your center serves families with kids who are infants all the way up to 4- and 5-year-olds before they go off to kindergarten. Just
Yes.
over a decade ago, Vermont passed this big universal pre-K law, which requires that every 3- and 4-year-old have access to at least some hours of pre-K every week for free. How has pre-K, the landscape, changed for you all since this law was signed in 2014?
You know, it doesn't really, I mean, it affects our funding a little bit, but honestly, because the state by some they mean 10 hours of pre-K. And it's not, they say 10 hours, but it's actually a specific amount per month that they will pay for each student, and equals up to what the state has determined 10 hours is worth. So depending on the school and the region you're in, it may not actually cover what your tuition rate is for those 10 hours. And so I don't want to go right off the bat with like the struggles with it, but
let's get into it. So that means that like that families are getting a set amount of money, essentially a subsidy, to pay for a part of their tuition to your center. Correct.
Because there are very few places that you can get just 10 hours a week paid for. When I was the head of school at Neighborhood Schoolhouse in Brattleboro, we tried to start a program that was 3 mornings a week that about 5 kids added on to the pre-K class and then didn't have to pay. And I think it's possible. It's something that can be done, but it was definitely difficult. And, parents were just saying, oh, I went to the grocery store and came back because that's about as much time as I had each day. And so, the point of the bill was not to give parents a break. It was to make sure every child has a chance to have some level of experience in a classroom before they start in kindergarten, right. Especially with how much higher the expectations are for kindergarten these days, which you may have gone over in past interviews. And so it is really important that children get a chance to just have that group time to get used to some of that social emotional stuff they may not be getting at home with peers. And for that, I'm really grateful. And for the amount of funding that we can get for it, I'm really grateful. It would be nice to see more, though, because it isn't really enough hours even for the children to get enough to really be prepared for kindergarten.
So where else can kids in the Montpelier region where you are access pre-K other than Turtle Island?
So the Montpelier Roxbury district has a program at Union Elementary School in Montpelier. It's some children have a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. Some children have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, and it's 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that is free. Because it's public school. It is a lottery system, so usually there's more children who need the spots than get them. And of course, for working families, it can be difficult because you're getting 10 to 15 hours a week depending on which program you're able to get into. But it's wonderful. I mean, one of my kids goes there part-time, and the educators are phenomenal. I would recommend anyone go there. But
so do you have some families who are trying to kind of piecemeal figure this out, like sending their kids a couple days a week there to that free program that's, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then, asking for a part-time slot at Turtle Island? Does that happen?
So we decided to offer that to a few families this year who were asking for it, but it is difficult because we don't typically offer split day schedules because it's really hard for the kids to transition in and out. And so by split day, I mean like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday. Like we would typically offer like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Wednesday through Friday spot. Because for a lot of kids, it's like every day is Monday if they have to skip days in between. And because, when it's a part-time program, then all the kids are their own cohort that see each other, the same group, and they don't miss out on anything when they're not there. But when you have kids who are part-time with a group where most kids are full-time, it can be really challenging for those kids because there's so much they've missed every time they come in. Yeah.
Well, we would love to hear from you, our listeners, about how your family is handling pre-K. Do you have a kid in the pre-K system? Is it something that feels inaccessible to your family? If so, why? You could call in at 800-639-2211 or email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. We have Robert in Westford calling in. Robert, what are your thoughts?
Hey, Michaela, taking the off speaker here. Yeah, I appreciate the time. I heard you announce the purpose of the show today and wanted to call in.
Thanks.
My wife and I have preschool 4-year-old twins who they're in sort of a hybrid program at the Essex Park and Rec preschool. But really wanted to advocate for an idea, which is if for us, it's a 20-minute drive, 25 minutes to school. We'd love to be using our community school, the Westford School, for the preschool program, which unfortunately has a very long waiting list and only offers those 3 half-time days. So for us, I wonder, why is there no after-school program modeled similar to a regular after-school program where we could have our kids in full-time at Westford, pay the extra money we already pay the other program in Essex, potentially raising enough money to pay for the teacher there. You know, like if there's 10 or more children on this waiting list, it would seem like there's a big demand for local community preschool, at least in our community.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Secretary Saunders or someone else wants to address that.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, we'll be joined by Agency of Education Secretary Zoie Saunders, as well as Janet McLaughlin from the Department of Children and Families, and the head of Building Bright Futures in just a couple moments. And I'll be sure to bring up this question, because I know that figuring out an after-school model has been a big part of their conversations about pre-K. But while we have you, Jocelyn, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on this kind of mixed model.
I can share the East Montpelier, the Washington Central School District, which is basically, we joke that Montpelier is the hole in the donuts because Washington Central goes all the way around it. But they have something called Community Connections that they have developed, and it's on site, and it is basically children are in the pre-K, which is more of the academic type environment part-time, and then if they need it, they can sign up for the childcare section, basically, which covers the extra care there. So children don't have to go elsewhere during the week. So that's a pretty amazing model. I have not seen it elsewhere, but they have been doing it, and it has been pretty successful. So it would be a model for others to follow for sure.
And Jocelyn, I have heard from childcare providers in other parts of the state that expanding universal pre-K and creating more programs within the public school system could, as a byproduct, destabilize some private childcare providers, because more 3- and 4-year-olds will be going into the public school system and not staying with them. Is that a concern for Turtle Island?
Majorly. It's a concern for all of us. The biggest thing is funding, because, infant toddler care, first of all, infant toddler care is, I'm sure you know, and we'll be talking about how impacted it is. It's the waiting lists are just astronomical for that, children under 3. But the issue is that we can't have too many spots, because we can't afford to have too many spots, because the teacher to child ratios have to be so much lower, and should be. For instance, infants, children under 2 are, for the most part, 1-to-4 ratio. So if you have 2 teachers, you can have up to 8 children in a classroom, even children who are, 16 months old. Yeah. So to pay our teachers and pay for our facilities and everything else when we can't have big enough classrooms to really support that financially means that we really can't. There's a lot of places that just don't even offer infant and toddler care because they can't afford it. And so we would have to see greater funding and support in kind of retrofitting our spaces to make sure that rooms that had housed older children can house younger children.
And also just to connect to the dots here, are you saying too that those classrooms with with a different ratio where there are fewer teachers and lots of kids, like for 3- and 4-year-olds or more kids, those are more cost effective for the school to run, which means that they could, in a way, sort of subsidize the high cost infant rooms?
They do. They really do. Yeah.
So we're about to be joined, as I said, by 3 of the people who are partially in charge of creating this vision for pre-K in Vermont and expanding universal free pre-K for 4-year-olds specifically. What do you think we should ask them? What do you want to say to them?
My main question is there, I imagine it's going to be hard to find and set up spaces within the public schools for this. So I imagine they're going to be having to reach out to those of us who've been universal pre-K partners for a long time and have proven our worth as pre-K providers. How are they looking to work with us? Is there a possibility of expanding, full-time funding to the private places that, are able to manage that? And how can we work together to do that? And if so, how can we have ways to join up with the districts more? We currently most of us don't have access to the professional development that's offered to the early childhood educators in the public schools. We don't have benefits for our teachers at all in most early childhood programs. Are there ways that we can make some sort of a coalition of sorts to be able to make sure that we have really successful, high-quality pre-K for these children that doesn't create such a massive overhaul that may take years upon years to do?
Yeah. All great questions, and we're excited to continue this conversation with some of these statewide leaders. Jocelyn York is one of the co-executive directors of Turtle Island Children's Center in Montpelier. Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time, and good luck on the rest of the move.
Thank you very much.
All right, coming up, we're going to be joined by a couple of those education leaders helping to shape pre-K statewide, including the head of Vermont's Agency of Education, Zoie Saunders. That is in just 1 minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the pre-kindergarten system in Vermont. This is the final installment in Vermont Edition's fall weekly series on education, School Stories. So here's the situation with pre-K in Vermont. A law that was passed a decade ago called Act 166, it offers pre-K to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds until they're ready for kindergarten. They get 10 hours a week for free for 35 weeks of the year. Then another law passed just a couple years ago called Act 76 says the state needs to look into expanding full-day pre-K for all 4-year-olds by July of next year. Our guests this hour are helping to shape the vision for pre-K education in Vermont. This work is in part split between two big state agencies, the Agency of Education and the Department of Children and Families. Zoie Saunders is the Secretary of Vermont's Agency of Education. Secretary Saunders, welcome back to the show.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Janet McLaughlin, the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families. Janet, good to speak with you again as well.
Yes, glad to be here.
And last but not least, we have Morgan Crossman joining the conversation. She is the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures. It's a nonprofit, or it's an organization that manages Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan, which is this big strategic plan for Vermont's early childhood system. She also advises the governor and the legislature on issues that impact young children. Morgan, how did I do with that one? Is that right?
That was great.
Okay,
Thank you so
great.
much, Michaela.
All right, so briefly, Morgan, help us set the stage here. Can you tell us again, what exactly did Act 66 and then Act 76 do for universal pre-K in Vermont?
Sure. So I think that Jocelyn did a really nice job of talking about the importance of access to pre-K and access to high quality early learning experiences for young children before they enter kindergarten. And that was the original intent of that law. And under Act 76, the intent was to really think about how we build and expand equitable access, especially for 4-year-olds as we come into the next few years. And what's incredible is that Vermont has been consistently leading the country in access to pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds in a mixed delivery model. And you heard Jocelyn talk a little bit about that as well, right? Where, 60% of our slots are available in community-based programs. And it's been so important in Vermont, in such a rural state, for children and families to have access to programs that meet their needs and their preferences that are close to home. And that mixed delivery model means that kids can be educated and receive those services in licensed, registered family childcare programs, center-based programs, and school-based programs. And, over the past decade, what we've seen is a significant impact in those investments, right? So our recent data on student outcomes is showing that children who are attending our pre-K programs are more ready for kindergarten. Our 4-year-olds are now exceeding expectations in math and social emotional development. And we also know from some of the national data that 2 years of pre-K is really important for child development outcomes. So again, our state's made significant investments, and we have such a strong public and private partnership as we think about this work. And there's a lot of work to be done to strengthen that system.
Yeah, so all three of you were involved in this committee called the Pre-K Education Implementation Committee to try to figure out how to expand full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds. Janet, help me get this straight here. Is it a requirement of the law that this happens by July 1st of next year, or is the goal of this committee just to figure out maybe how, if we were going to do it, could we do it? A little
Yeah.
squishier.
So the law tasked, the Agency of Education and the Agency of Human Services with setting up this pre-kindergarten education committee to make recommendations for how to expand access to pre-kindergarten education for 4-year-olds. And we had a group of about 18 representatives from programs, schools, agencies, and sort of other organizations with relevant knowledge that met over about a 16-month period of time to look at, the changes that could be made for pre-kindergarten education. And we really deeply sort of studied the national best practice. And as Morgan was saying, recognize that there is a lot in Vermont to be proud of, and that additional changes should build on what's working. So while the legislature had asked the committee to develop an implementation plan, the committee came away with sort of 4 key recommendations that were a little different than what the legislature had asked for. So the committee was pretty unanimous in maintaining pre-kindergarten education for 3-year-olds, wanted to expand pre-kindergarten education for 4-year-olds, and then had 2 additional recommendations around funding that spoke to the need to sort of better understand and allocate pre-K resources. So there's not that, and that report was delivered to the legislature last December, and it arrived in the context of really robust discussions around education transformation. So at this moment, there's not a mandate for changes by next July, but it has been a lot of deep discussion about what's working right now and what are some of the changes that could be made to improve the program and make sure all children are entering kindergarten ready to learn.
Now, Secretary Saunders, you joined the Agency of Education in the spring of last year, so that was after the passage of Act 76. Reading through this report that Janet was just talking about from this committee that you were on, you co-chaired, I was struck by the fact that the committee, it says in the report, you were unable to agree on a full set of recommendations. That is a bit worrisome to read from the outside looking in. Now that you've been on the job for a year and a half, what is your vision for expanding pre-K in Vermont? Do you think it needs to be expanded?
Absolutely. I think expanding pre-kindergarten access is critical. The vision for universal pre-K is to ensure that every child has access to high-quality early childhood education. That gives them the social, emotional, and academic foundation that they need to be ready for kindergarten and beyond. We see this as an essential part of our cradle-to-career approach because we know early learning experiences set the stage for longer-term success. I had the privilege of co-chairing that committee towards the end of their work, and I was very encouraged by the fact that there was broad consensus on the importance of extending hours for 4-year-olds and also maintaining that pre-kindergarten access for 3-year-olds. I think that does reflect a shared understanding of the importance of early childhood learning, and also that access alone isn't enough. So as we talk about this, it's also around quality, consistency, and making sure that there is sufficient time in the program settings to support the children's development and help with that transition into kindergarten. As we worked on the committee, we identified some of the current barriers, and you've heard some of those described in the call today. And our challenge before us is how we can move forward with our education transformation and ensuring that we are adequately resourcing our system to expand pre-K access. And that will continue to be a focus of our work as we move into the legislative session. You had mentioned that in the report, we identified there were areas where we couldn't come to consensus as a group.
Right.
And a lot of that was because the recommendations were coming at a time where the state was beginning to review some of the larger changes that would happen through education transformation. And the committee felt that it was really important to have more detail and understanding around what the future state of our education system will look like in terms of funding and governance and quality metrics in order to really come to consensus on some of these additional areas where there was some question. So I feel that as we move forward in our work through the education transformation, we'll be able to provide greater clarity on how we can fund the expansion of access to pre-K, and how we can overcome some of the barriers that were identified. Some of those barriers you've heard on this call are related to, the space in a location. Some are related to workforce, transportation. And so all of those things are very important for us to name as we move forward and collectively strengthening our entire education system and prioritizing access to pre-K, because it is really critically important for our students to enter school ready.
So what I'm hearing is that everyone seems to agree that pre-K is really important. It means a lot in kids' development. We want to expand it, but there's a lot of other pressures going on right now, and we don't really have a timeline for how we can do that. I mean, there's this mandate from voters right now to cut education costs so we can bring down our property taxes. It's been a huge focus of the past couple of legislative sessions. So by simultaneously asking school leaders to expand pre-K for 4-year-olds, are we sort of asking them to complete an impossible task? I'd love to hear all your thoughts on this. Morgan, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think that now is a really challenging moment for all of our partners who are supporting young kids and serving as educators in the system. They are being asked to do so much, not just in terms of education, but also supporting social emotional development and thinking about the health and well-being of the students who are showing up in those spaces and supporting their families. However, I think that one of the things they are really looking for right now is an opportunity to serve kids and families in the best intent, right? And what we know right now is that the total number of hours that we're providing to families doesn't work. 10 hours a week is really challenging. And we heard from Robert that, as we're thinking about the total number of hours of care, as we're thinking about transitions, the need for after school and out of school time care, that we really are in a position as a state to think about that level of improvement for kids and families, because the current system isn't working in terms of the access. So I think we really have an important opportunity, especially alongside education transformation as a whole, to say how are we improving the system for our youngest and most vulnerable kids and families.
And the cost of pre-K right now, it's part of a school district's budget as approved by district voters, so that the cost of that program is paid, again, from the voter-approved district budget. And we are in this period where voters want to see their district budgets go down so their property taxes don't go up. Janet, what do we do with that?
Yeah, well, I think it does speak to the context that changed when the Pre-Kindergarten Education Committee was meeting, right? So that was right in that spring when so many school budgets were voted down, was when the committee was debating what its recommendations needed to be. And so that sort of is why the committee said, let's identify the direction we want to head in, but the specifics are really going to be tied on what the appetite is, and what the direction is that we have for education in the state. I think another point I would make that I think is relevant to that is the investments that have been made through Act 76 related to early childhood education, and specifically for infant toddler care that Jocelyn was mentioning. And so, this year is the first school year that we're heading into a school year with Act 76 childcare financial assistance expansions fully implemented. And that really does shore up the rates that the state is paying on behalf of families related to infants and toddlers. And so I think we hopefully will begin to see some additional strength and stability in the areas of the system that wrap around the pre-kindergarten education that might allow people to begin to think more productively and creatively about how they can create programs that meet families' needs, especially because some families want part-time hours, some want full-time hours, some want it, are really excited to have it in the public school. Some want it to be in the same space where if they have a preschooler and an infant, they really want to be at one program. So it's really all of those options sort of end up being needed for families. And so it's about thinking about sort of creatively how we're blending and braiding the funding sources.
Uh, Secretary Saunders, do you have a sense of a timeline for when we're going to get some of the answers to these questions about priorities and how we're going to use the states and taxpayers' limited funds? Is this a question for this next legislative session?
Yes, this is a question for the next legislative session, and there are already activities outlined to move forward in getting clarity on how we will fund our system. So the education transformation is ultimately about making deliberate choices to invest dollars where they will have the greatest impact for students. And that means aligning our resources so every child benefits from the opportunity that we want them to have in our system. And last year, the General Assembly passed Act 76. And within that, there was explicit language that through this process of education transformation, we want to expand access to pre-K and adjust the weight for pre-K to ensure that the system is funded adequately to deliver on those goals. And so there's, as part of that work, there are some committees that are evaluating, doing a deeper dive into the data and analyzing really what's needed to appropriately resource the system. Those recommendations will be brought forward to the General Assembly next session to unpack further and will be part of the broader conversation around how we're funding our system. But when we think about funding our education system, we have consensus that we need to focus on pre-K as part of that entire continuum. And there's really very explicit and clear language within the letter of the law to focus on pre-K in this next session as we're finalizing our new funding approach. And that funding approach is designed to be more equitable and also predictable so that we can really help to sustain high quality educational offerings across the continuum from pre-K through 12th grade.
So again, this 2023 law, Act 76, said the state needs to look into expanding to full day pre-K for all 4-year-olds. Secretary Saunders, is that still part of your vision for Vermont's education system, if not by the original date of 2026, perhaps in the next decade?
Yes, actually, when the governor came forward with the original education transformation proposal, it included the goal of expanding pre-K and specifically expanding the hours for 4-year-olds. So that's been really consistent, and it built upon the recommendation of the task force in recognizing the need to expand the number of hours. So as we're moving forward with planning and really getting clear around how we will fund and resource our system, there is a very clear goal to expand the number of hours that we can provide for pre-K.
If you have thoughts on Vermont's pre-K system or have a kid in pre-K, want to share your experiences, give us a call at 800-639-2211. We're going to take a short break, but we will hear more of your voices when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. This hour, we are discussing pre-K in Vermont. It is the final installment of our fall series, School Stories. Every Tuesday this month, we've been taking on issues related to Vermont's education system. Our guests this hour are helping to shape the vision for 3- and 4-year-olds pre-kindergarten education in Vermont. Zoie Saunders is the Secretary of the Agency of Education. Janet McLaughlin is the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families. And Morgan Crossman is the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures. I want to understand better how, as we expand pre-K options and access, we are trying to ensure that kids are getting a standard level of care and education. As I understand it, Vermont does not have state-level rules in place for teacher prep and requirements. Are there national benchmarks that we could follow? Morgan, what are your thoughts on standardization for teachers in pre-K?
Thanks, Michaela. We spent a lot of time talking about quality and what education practices should look like in the Pre-Kindergarten Education Implementation Committee. And we talked a lot about NEAR's work. And I'd love to have Janet speak a little bit further about how we're thinking about, as a state, moving towards the highest quality of having a well-educated workforce.
Janet?
Sure. The universal pre-kindergarten, as it's structured right now, does have many standards associated with it. This is not every single childcare program. These are ones that have higher STARS ratings. They have increased teacher qualifications. They have structured assessments for children. They need to use early learning standards. So I want to say that this is actually a program that really is, designed to provide that high quality education experience. There is some differences in terms of teacher qualifications across some of the different settings for pre-kindergarten education. And the reason for that is because when UPK was established 10 years ago, it was being sort of inserted into an existing system, right? There already were early childhood education programs operating outside of the public school system, for decades. And so we needed time really wanted to have children have access to programs right away in places that they were already comfortable and were already offering high quality programming. And the teacher qualifications just were different because they were different settings and they had different rules. So right now, they are a little bit different. And I think the question is, what's the next step we can take in terms of standardizing those teacher qualifications across all settings? To do that, we really would need a transition plan to support additional educators in potentially the lead teachers, additional ones getting AOE educator licenses, but also there are, the assistant teachers and the support teachers are also really important, and we really need to standardize the qualifications for those educators as well. And there's a lot happening with that. We have a lot of supports out of the Child Development Division where we're providing scholarships, apprenticeships, support for people that want to follow peer review processes to get educator licenses. And there's also an effort out of the Office of Professional Recognition, the Secretary of State's office, to look at a licensure pathway for those who are not necessarily teaching in a public school setting.
Right. So some early childhood advocates want to prioritize a bill in this next legislative session that would create professional licensure for early childhood educators who work in these private childcare programs. This stalled in the legislature last session. Is this ECE profession bill, as it's called, something that you support, Janet?
It's something that we certainly support the goals of the bill in terms of ensuring standard competencies, based on national best practices, based on the exact same standards that are used for AOE educator licenses. And the other thing that's really appealing about this option is that it really increases sort of the individual accountability associated with being an early childhood educator. This is skilled work, this is difficult work, and you're also working with a pretty vulnerable population of young children. So it is really important that we make sure that those folks working with our youngest children are, well prepared and well supported for those roles.
And Secretary Saunders, do you support this bill or simply the general goals behind it?
So as we're moving forward, I think it is really important for us to focus on what I would call shared accountability, right? We want to make sure that we have high quality standards that are consistent in every setting where we're providing preschool education to our youngest learners. And that's a lot of the work that we are doing at the Agency of Education in partnership with the Agency of Human Services as our joint oversight of the program to make sure that we're really putting forward those highest quality standards and that we can ensure we're providing the right level of support so that all of our educators have the resources and training that they need to be able to deliver on those goals. I think Vermont, it really stands out in terms of our focus and emphasis on early childhood education. We see that we have some of the greatest access to pre-K compared to other states. So that's an incredibly positive thing and something to be proud of. And now, as we're talking about that, it's also around quality, right? So the part of the reason that we're able to have such wide access is that we are operating on a mixed delivery system. And so what that means is we're able to fully leverage all of the different partners that can operate in this space to deliver education for students. And as we're moving forward, it's all around providing the right level of training, oversight, and support to ensure consistent quality in all of those settings. And so what we're doing at the Agency of Education in partnership is also providing a lot of job-embedded training and coaching to support educators. And that will continue to be a focus of the work, irrespective of any changes with licensure. We're looking intentionally at the overall design of the system and how we can provide the right type of training, support, and guidance. And the other piece I would mention, we're talking a lot about teachers, but we are intentionally partnering with families as well. So recently we issued resources for families who have young children to provide an overview of the Vermont early learning standards. And so that helps them to reinforce those learning expectations at home as well. So we are really excited about that and certainly see all of this as important to evaluating quality across the settings where we provide pre-K education.
I just want to be sure I understand your answer here, since I do think this bill is going to be one of the big ones in this area in the next legislative session, this bill to create professional licensure for early childhood educators. Do you support the bill or not? Or are you saying that this isn't really something that directly is under your purview with the Agency of Education?
I need to look further at the specifics of the law. I mean, I think our focus is making sure that we do have consistent quality in education and making sure that we have the right level of support. And so that's the lens as I look at any sort of new legislation.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the other big levers that's being pulled that's sort of out of our control right now is federal funding for education. There's so many big changes going on at the U.S. Department of Education and, potential changes to Head Start funding, other federally funded programs. Morgan, as we talk here about pre-K in Vermont, are there things going on at the federal level that we should be keeping in mind during this conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michaela. One of the things that I am tracking alongside my team and colleagues across the state is what is the federal impact, when, for whom, and how do we as a state be proactive in understanding what we have to protect in terms of our most vulnerable kids. Some of the things that we're paying attention to right now are potential changes in childcare and in thinking about both Head Start funding, but how we're also supporting, again, the youngest and most vulnerable kids and families in our state, thinking about our immigrant populations, thinking about children with disabilities and special healthcare needs, and how we are showing up to support access to services for them. So we are paying very close attention to what might come in changes in childcare. We're looking at changes and potential opportunities related to Head Start, and also after school and out of school time care. And I know that Jocelyn mentioned that, and I think Robert also mentioned that earlier in the call. How are we looking at our current existing system for out of school time care and after school?
Janet, I'd love your thoughts here as well about changes at the federal level and if they are impacting how you do your job or think about the future of pre-K in Vermont. Janet, are you still with us? Well, Secretary Saunders, I was going to ask you as well, so we'll jump right to you. Are you there with us too? Secretary Saunders?
Yes, hello. I lost connection for a
Oh,
moment.
great.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, we were talking about changes at the federal level for education funding and how they might be impacting how you do your work and are thinking about this vision for pre-K in Vermont. What are your thoughts there?
The Agency of Education has been very much closely tracking changes on the federal landscape. So what you're noting is a level of uncertainty, and also there's things that we are trying to actively manage in terms of being proactive with how we fund and support our overall education system. Janet can speak more specifically to Head Start, but I do think as a part of a broader context, it's important for us to stay on top of what some of the proposals are that are coming out of Washington, and understand how we can mitigate any sort of negative impacts and moving forward to give access to students.
Yeah. Janet, are you back with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
No problem. We'd love to hear your thoughts on potential federal changes to Head Start specifically, how that affects our conversation here today.
Yes. So for Head Start, which is really for families that are particularly low income to receive early childhood education as well as wraparound supports for for the child and their family. There was some initial discussion in some of the federal budget discussions about cutting Head Start altogether, but right now it seems to have been everything has been restored, and the current budgets include sort of continuing funding for Head Start, as well as for the Child Care Development Fund. So at this moment, it appears that those specific programs, the federal funding is relatively safe, but the real concern is some of the other big changes that are going to put pressure on the state budget overall. Things like the SNAP cuts and the Medicaid cuts that are often used to be able to sort of wrap around the children that are using these programs and their families who need additional supports.
Well, as we wind down here, I would hope the three of you could help us sort of look to the future, and for listeners who are trying to, figure out, when is the next time I could see a big change to how I access pre-K in Vermont. Maybe is it going to get cheaper? Is it going to get a little easier to find a slot or find a full day slot? I know a lot's going on in this next legislative session, but Morgan, is there again one moment in this short to middle timeline that you think people should be aware of?
I think paying close attention to next legislative session is important, but I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is the partnership across the agencies and with our team and the network, but also with local school districts in thinking about how we transform the system. And I really appreciated Jocelyn's question at the beginning around, how do we think about partnership? How do we set up spaces in public and community-based programs. So my offer to partners across the state would be that we want to have conversations about how to do this really well, how to maintain a strong existing infrastructure while we're thinking about expansion, and to do that in collaboration.
Well, we are going to give you the last word because the end of the hour is nigh. That was Morgan Crossman, the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures, which manages Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan. Morgan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Zoie Saunders, the Secretary of Vermont's Agency of Education. Secretary Saunders, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Janet McLaughlin, the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families. Janet, thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, that is it for today and for our School Stories series, though I am sure it is not the last time we will be talking about education in the coming weeks and months. If you want to listen back to other episodes in the series, you can scroll through our podcast feed to find our recent hours on the rise of AI in the classroom, sex ed, school district consolidation, and school meals. Today's show was directed by Aaliyah Papes. John Ahrens is our managing producer. Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro are our producers. Today's call screener was Rick Barrett, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.